Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. We're taping on Friday, the 28th of September, and we are looking forward. We're organizing for the gathering, the founding convention of the United Front Against Austerity that will be held in New York City in Tribeca by Canal Street on Saturday, October 27th from noon to 6 at 56 Walker Street, and that will be the founding convention. And there are important developments on the organizing front. I'm going to basically relegate most of those to next week. We'll get a full report on who's coming, but some fairly well-known names are already committed, so that's important. And above all, names that represent political forces, right? Not just individual stars, but people that represent some kind of mass mobilization capability. So October 27th, and this the reason for this will be the theme now of the first couple of segments. The other thing is the book. It's still coming, but it's now the title. We've got a title, Just Too Weird. Just Too Weird. Bishop Romney's Mormon Putsch Against America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Just Too Weird. Bishop Romney's Mormon Putsch Against America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. And we'll be talking about that in the second part of the program. But now let's go first of all to the question of the day. Austerity does not work. Austerity is genocide. Austerity is national suicide. Austerity is the class war of the rich against everybody else. It's the class war not just of the Koch brothers, but also of Soros, and very much to the point, Peter Peterson of the Peterson Institute, the Concord Coalition, somebody who has smeared about $500 million around Washington in recent years to push his austerity agenda, right? This is a Lehman Brothers boss, right? The biggest bankrupteur of the age, and they have the gall to say that the crisis was caused by entitlements, by government spending, and he's been trying to do this, remember, with the Strauss and Howe generation books. He obviously gave them money, and he said, do whatever, write whatever you want, but get something in there about how Social Security must go. Well, dear Peter Peterson, when the crisis came, it didn't come as a budget crisis. It came as a world derivatives panic caused by collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps, and other derivatives used by the zombie banks and the hedge fund hyenas that you represent. So these people are now gathering their forces. The momentary situation would seem to be this. The ruling elite seems to have, at least there's a growing view, that Romney is hopeless, that Romney, his bungling, his incompetence, momentarily seem to be incorrigible. Even with the ruling class, even with the Anglo-American ruling class, the masters of human destiny behind him, he doesn't seem to be able to make progress. This has got something to do structurally with the Republican Party, right? They've got a crazed, reactionary, petty bourgeoisie. They've got an unbalanced line way to the right. If you follow the crazed, reactionary, petty bourgeoisie, also known as the Tea Party, you're halfway to Stormtroop Junction. You can't go and try to sell that directly to the American people. So he's trying to straddle from the center, which of course is center-right these days, all the way out to the crazed Tea Party, lunatic, petty bourgeoisie, and it can't be done. So he's oscillating between those 2 points. This doesn't work. So the ruling class is now, they're not abandoning Romney because his fundraising continues at an intensive rate. And certainly we should bear in mind that the final blitz of brainwashing ads by Romney will have significant effect. And we've just had, for example, the the little Elmer Gantry, Ralph Reed, remember him from the Madoff days? And the, I'm sorry, not Madoff, but the other guy, right? The Abramoff. I got the wrong off. The Abramoff period of Republican history. But now Ralph Reed is back, and he's got $15 million to spend, and that'll buy some ads. So there are many countervailing processes going on. But the principal point is the ruling class is now preparing, really playing on two tables, right? One is if Romney wins, still possible, absolutely possible. And we'll talk about the polls in a couple of minutes. But the other possibility, of course, that Obama could win. So what do they do then? And I think we ought to address this now as a coming crisis. And indeed, this is exactly why we need the United Front Against Austerity. This is absolutely crucial. Obama is running a campaign in which he poses as the guardian and defender of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the social safety net, the entitlements, the reforms of the New Deal, the Great Society, and the New Frontier. That's his public posture. At the same time, remember, I warned you, deception, dissembling, lying, trickery are the essence of Obama. And if you haven't figured that out, buy the books. Barack H. Obama, The Unauthorized Biography. Obama, The Postmodern Coup. Both 4 years old, but the psychology has not changed. This is also incorrigible. This does not change. So Obama is posturing as the protector of the American people from these Republican ogres, and ogres, of course, they are. But Obama's going to protect us. He is at the same time preparing to betray his own base. He's getting ready to sell out all the poor people that are now working to get him reelected. And I've warned you about this. I've been telling you about this for months. The key words are the fiscal cliff, the lame duck session, and the grand bargain. I warned the group at the World's Fair in Flushing Meadow, New York, back in July. I've been talking about this repeatedly. It's clear. It should be clear to everybody. Obama is getting ready to sell you out. And he told you at his speech at the Democratic National Convention, he described himself as eager to reach a grand bargain with the reactionary Republicans. Even if the Republicans are defeated, he's willing to use them as a fig leaf to do this. Now, here's the specific indication we have. Let's use a useful article by Sam Stein in the Huffington Post. Sam Stein of the Huffington Post on the Internet writes on the 24th of September, Obama may do Social Security reform during lame duck session, Senate Democrats worry. Washington, concern is mounting among some Senate Democrats that President Barack Obama will make a deal with Senate Republicans during the lame duck session, that means December of this year, that would result in changes to the benefit structure of Social Security. One of the most progressive voices in the caucus, Bernie Sanders, says he was glad to hear Obama tell the AARP last week that he would be open to raising the cap on income that is taxed for purposes of paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. This is, of course, the cap at about $103,000 per person. The Social Security payroll tax cuts off at that point, and everything you earn beyond about $100K, you don't pay into the Social Security Trust Fund. So, of course, that's good, but that's the coding, that's the posturing, that's the deception, and we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Get set to attend the founding convention of the United Front Against Austerity, October 27th, New York City. More information. There will be a website up soon for that. And keep watching for Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Putsch Against America with polygamy, theocracy, and subversion. But now we're talking about Obama's deception. Yes, that's how he operates. It's all done with mirrors. Now, Romney, of course, is clear. Romney is going to tear you limb from limb. Romney and Ryan are coming at you with the proposal to flay you alive. That's open, right? That's pretty much bring it on, dead or alive. With Obama, it's more complex, but the basic tendency is the same, although there may be differences of degree, but this is still bad enough, believe me. Bernie Sanders is sounding the alarm, and fine, gold is where you find it. Obama told the AARP 10 days ago now, he's willing to remove this cap on the income, which is taxed for Social Security purposes. Obama also says he will not slash Social Security benefits. Now, Bernie says, oh, that's good, he's not going to slash us. Wait a minute, say others. If he's not going to slash you, he may give you the death of 1,000 cuts, which is not slashing. He's going to nick you and nick you and nick you and nick you. And that's really Obama's method, as I've pointed out. You know this catchphrase, the death of 1,000 cuts. However, Bernie Sanders is worried that the AARP speech by Obama could be posturing for the lame duck session immediately after the election, when lawmakers are expected to rush to find another grand bargain. Watch out for the grand bargain. Grand bargain means you get flayed alive on tax and entitlement reform to stave off the so-called fiscal cliff. And there it is, lame duck, grand bargain, fiscal cliff. Those three strikes, and you're dead, and a lot of Americans will die. So Sanders says that's exactly what's going to happen. In other words, the looting of Social Security. Unless someone of us stops it, and a number of us are working very hard on this, that's exactly what will happen. Everything being equal, unless we stop it, what will happen is there will be a quote-unquote grand bargain after the election in which the White House, some Democrats will sit down with Republicans, and they will move to a chained CPI. Now, chained CPI, this is, you will be shackled. You will be in chains. The chained CPI, Consumer Price Index, is a way to gouge you by understating the real rate of inflation. Now, this would be the second time that I'm aware of in 20 years. You may remember the infamous Boskin Commission. Michael Boskin, this was a figure of the Bush the Elder regime. He said, oh, my God, the Consumer Price Index overstates inflation. It's always understated it. But he said, we've got to slow down these cost of living increases in Social Security. And his proof was, why? I can buy Chablis on the corner, and that's got to be factored in. That was his argument. So this was a rich elitist. But he did gouge the people on the entitlements, and now they want to do another round. They want to fake it even more. All right, so that's the chained CPI. So we have to say, no, unchain us. Sanders and some others have signed a letter. They want to oppose including Social Security cuts or future or current beneficiaries in any deficit reduction package. All right, fine, but this is also written in water. Right? These are the Democratic Senate faction. This you can a lot of them are running for office themselves. That's what they're going to say. So the Obama answer to all this is from Axelrod. Axelrod is this is what, Trotsky's great grandson, I guess. He organizes putsches, or the family tradition is that. So Axelrod says the approach has to be a balanced one. Yeah, what does balanced mean to you, Axelrod? There's typical, by the way, a typical Trotskyist who's moved all the way over to the pretty far right. We've had discussions in the past. Can you raise the cap some? Yeah. How do you adjust the growth of the program? That's a discussion worth having. Sorry, Axelrod, not worth having. Don't have it. But he's telling you, you can't say you weren't warned. Again, we have to approach it in a balanced way. We're not going to cut our way to prosperity. We have to have a balance. So Halperin of Time magazine says to him, hey, Axelrod, what is Obama's proposal? answer. Mark, I'll tell you what, when you get elected to the U.S. Senate and sit at that table, this is not the time, says Axelrod, the neo-Trotskyist. All right, so you get the idea. The grand bargain is coming. There's never been any doubt about this. Obama wanted it. You remember we covered exhaustively a year ago, August now, how far he was willing to go. The Jonathan Chait revelations, not David Korn, but Jonathan Chait telling you he was willing to sell out the entire ranch for just a token tax increase on the super rich. Now remember, this is a country where 1% of the population owns 40% of the assets. 400 people own more than 150 million people. Assets, not income, assets. And 60%, the lower 60%, have 1% of the assets. And now we're talking about a balanced approach to gouge the widow's mite, because that's what Social Security is. Now, just as part of the campaign, watch for a campaign to develop. Ruth Marcus, an austerity ghoul at the Washington Post, writing this morning, Friday, September 28th. Ruth Marcus, austerity ghoul, quote, higher taxes won't do it. And her argument is the Republicans refuse to raise taxes, that's awful, but the Democrats refuse to gouge the entitlements, and that's, she says that maybe she devotes most of the time to it. So her space is devoted to this, and the idea is she has three scenarios of tax increases for the rich on income, where she shows you that the deficit continues to grow and things continue to get bad. Now notice, she's only talking income. The essential demand is the Wall Street sales tax. This is not the income of individuals. It's not anybody's income. It's turnover. It's buying and selling. It's a sales tax like any other kind of sales tax, but it has the benefit, with the $1 million exclusion that we've called for, the Wall Street sales tax is a progressive sales tax because it's going to hit the super rich as they do their program trading, flash trading, high-frequency trading. So the answer is not although we don't want to be doctrinaire either, not to increase income taxes. It is the Wall Street sales tax on speculation. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Two leading points. The October 27th founding convention of the United Front Against Austerity, 56 Walker Street, Tribeca, Canal Street, New York City. Be there. Represent your group. If you don't have a group, organize one and go as delegate. And just too weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon putsch against America. I think in one of the old movies of Jean-Luc Godard, I think it's La Chinoise, we have the famous scene where one of the characters is asked, would you rather be raped by Nixon or by Mao? Or perhaps it's, would you rather be raped by Johnson or Mao? Either LBJ or Mao Zedong. That is not the kind of question you want, but that's the kind of problem we have now. Would you rather be raped by Romney or by Obama? And we're just discussing the plan for this infamous December lame duck session. Now, in addition to the devastating economic effects, right? It looks like Obama is ready to increase the age for Social Security once again, getting you closer to 70, and he's also going to go for the chained CPI so that the cost of living increases are gouged and chiseled even more. So this is chiseling. Now, the difference from a point of view of morality, Clinton attacked Social Security before he got reelected, right? Clinton did it. He destroyed welfare. We're still having debates about welfare on various television programs. There is no more welfare. It's gone. What we have now is TAMF, temporary assistance for needy families. This is temporary. It's minimal. It's workfare because you're right on your way to a low-wage, dead-end, part-time job in most cases. So there is no more welfare. But Clinton did that. You could say, well, he was a desperate demagogue. He wanted to get reelected. He did it before the 1996 election. He didn't need to. He could have beaten Dole without that. Bill Clinton, so fatherly, so revered, gets on television. Don't forget what he did. He destroyed welfare when he didn't need to. The worst thing Clinton did, or among, maybe not, it's not the worst anymore. The worst is now what he did on derivatives and Glass-Steagall and related issues. But still, at the time that he did it in 1996, that was, let's say it's the worst thing he did in his first term. And it was plenty bad. But now look, Obama is even more depraved, because Obama thinks that he can win the election and then betray you, and then stay in office for 4 years. Now, you got to do something about this. You can see what's coming. And this is precisely the blind alley. The people who told you support Obama, the people who told you support Ron Paul, have led you into the desert. And where are they now? Where's Ron Paul? Ha ha. He's out there with little Rand counting his gold coins, right? He's going through his treasure chest. So somebody has got to stand up against this. And the one vehicle that I see in this void, and the void is complete, somebody's got to stand up for it, for the American people. It is the United Front Against Austerity. And now think about the political crisis. Obama campaigns as the defender of the entitlements, the social safety net, New Deal, New Frontier, Great Society. Maybe he wins the election. Within a month, 5 weeks, he turns around and betrays everybody by selling them out. This will be only the beginning of betrayal, because it's the reactionary demands, the Peter Peterson demands never end, and the Koch brothers too. They want the destruction of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, no more child labor laws, and so forth. And they'll be making progress on all of those. So that will lead to quite a big political crisis. So in some ways, it validates the scenario that I've said. In other words, if you could defeat the Republican Party, crush them, and have them revert to what they really ought to be, a party of the crazed, racist, reactionary, xenophobic, backlash, petty bourgeoisie, low-wage employers, rural, small-town, petty bourgeoisie, especially in the South, and so forth, that would then lead to a situation where the Democratic Party might split into two parts, right? Because you can see, even today, there is the dominant side, which is the Wall Street Democrats, and then there's something left of the New Deal Democrats. But, of course, the New Deal Democrats are not organized. There's no Democratic Leadership Council for the New Deal side of the Democrats. I'm sorry, there are groups that pretend to be, but they're not. So it's gonna take something independent, something outside of this rotten two-party system to be able to bring that about. But cut the Republicans down to size, Democrats split. But where's the program? Where's the organization? Where's the momentum to make this happen? So that's one of many scenarios. Not the only one, and I'm not betting on that one. But that's possible. So the one thing for sure, none of the scenarios of any kind of decent outcome will work without the United Front Against Austerity. Now, let's look at some related questions. Austerity proven not to work. This is the irony, the hysteria, the obsession of these lunatic elites, the incompetent, monetarist, Malthusian ruling class of the Western world. Just this past week, we've had Spain and Greece. Big strikes, big demonstrations, big protest marches, and so forth. These places have been under the gun of austerity now for years, certainly Greece longer than Spain. In the case of Greece, this is the first big protest since the election, right? So the New Democracy with Samaras came in, and they wanted to get the conditionalities made softer, and they didn't get anything much. So that is now leading towards another clash. And maybe, the quicker the Samaras government falls, the better it is. The quicker Alexis Tsipras takes over and Syriza, the quicker this happens, the better it is for everybody. And then let him show what he can do. And if he sticks to his program, organization, leadership, and strategy plans, that would be a hopeful sign. In the case of Spain, of course, this is the reactionary Rajoy. Spain now has 25% unemployed and 50% youth unemployed. That is a depression. There is no way around it. That's a depression, and that's not so difficult, not so different from other places. And what is the IMF, the Troika, right? The memorandums, European Central Bank, European Commission, Barroso, and the IMF. More austerity, more cuts. We're just told now there's been a stress test on the Spanish banks, and they need $60 billion or 60 billion euros even to be pronounced in good health. And they're going to get that from the European Commission. But in exchange for that, there'll be a new round of killer austerity and conditionalities. This is simply insane. This gets us nowhere. We've got to break out of this. One of the most obvious things for places like this is the debt moratorium on derivative debt. Any debt denominated in derivatives, any debt containing derivatives, anytime there are options, futures, indices, CDOs, CDS, or anything like this built in, freeze it. Freeze it for 5 years or the duration of the world economic crisis, whichever takes longer, and give the ability to make that call to somebody reasonable, right? The government in question. So these places have blown up. As the depression rolls on, China and India declining. Some say they've reached bottom, others not. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So this is the problem. We have the Wall Street Democrats, the reactionary Republicans in particular with Ryan, are coming at you with the Texas chainsaw. And this is clear. On the other hand, watch out for Obama with the 1,000 cuts method, right? He'll nick you and nick you and nick you, and the end result, I'm afraid, is the same. Think about it also in these terms, right? With the Obama is harping again and again on the 47% by Romney. And, of course, that is a horrendous, shocking, absolutely unacceptable rant, right? He obviously hates 47% of the American people. That's Romney's class consciousness talking. But then we have Obama's class consciousness. Remember the famous quote, also given to a fundraising meeting in San Francisco, not in Florida, but in San Francisco. We have, and this is all in the Obama books, right? Barack H. Obama, the unauthorized biography, where he says, the jobs went away 25 years ago, and they haven't come back. Who got rid of them? Volcker, that you brought into your administration there, Obama, but they haven't come back. So people have become bitter, and they're clinging to guns, religion, anti-trade, anti-immigration, says Obama. Now, that's his class consciousness. This is the sort of center to left oligarch view, right? Romney gives you the right oligarch, and with Obama you've got the, I hesitate to say left oligarch because it's a centro-oligarch view, but you're just dealing with striations of opinion within the financier oligarchy. So that's unacceptable. How dare you offer us this choice? As I tried to put out on the Twitter in the past week, if you are the ruling class of this country and you come to the American people and say, now you get to choose between Obama and Romney, the answer to that is a general strike. The answer to that is nix, a plague on both your houses, but then let's go and build the alternative. So you want the alternative, you better be at 56 Walker Street in New York City on the 27th of October, and you've got to have a program. It's got to become clear. Look, let's just look at some of the issues. We just had the big deal this past week was the scab referees, right? So the National Football League, the fat cat billionaire owners of the National Football League who get their stadiums built by taxpayer money, who use the race to the bottom to play one city against another, get everything paid for. These are organized crime figures, people. Organized crime figures, gone legit, maybe partially or maybe not so partially. So they're holding out. They want to gouge the refs. The refs want a defined benefit pension. Who wouldn't? That keeps the risk on the employer. But the fat cat owners say, no, we're going to give you a 401k and then you're on your own. So the genesis of that concept, by the way, is very interesting. Remember, Thomas Carlyle. We get John Stuart Mill of the British East India Company Intelligence Department, and he promotes Thomas Carlyle, proto-fascist, fascist. The fascist Carlyle promotes Ralph Waldo Emerson. His famous essay is Self-Reliance. Self-reliance in the hands of Herbert Hoover in 1932 becomes rugged individualism and the creed of the Republican Party today. You're on your own. But so that's what the fat cat owners are telling the refs. Now, the dispute about the game, fine, everybody's seen it. But the bottom line on this is the intent of the U.S. ruling class of all striations is to say the entire U.S. economy should be low-wage, scab labor, non-union. That's what Romney wants. That's what Rand Paul wants, Ron Paul, every one of them a union buster, Obama a union buster, Arnie Duncan a union buster. They betrayed Wisconsin. They betrayed the Chicago teachers, and so forth. If you want to draw the lesson of this NFL story, you need federal laws to do the following. Ban lockouts. Make lockouts illegal. In Germany, at least at a certain time in the 70s and 80s, lockouts were illegal. You couldn't do it. And ban scab labor, what they call replacement workers. Ban scabs. Because when you look at what the scab referees did to this game, it's a game, what are they going to do to a factory? What are they going to do to capital goods? They're going to do something similar. We can't afford that. We've got to have a minimum wage that means something, and we can't have these anti-union tactics. Now, the Chicago teachers, I think there's nothing to add to that. It's obvious that they were, the leadership of this clique running the union were not going to resist when somebody from the Obama clique calls them up and say, look, you're embarrassing the president. We want you to cave in and give up most of your demands, because most of the stuff they needed they didn't get. They got a few face-saving things. Naturally, you'll always find Trotskyists who are willing to say they got absolutely nothing, so watch out for that, too. Atwater, California is about to go bankrupt. We got to do something about this, right? We need revenue sharing. For that, we got to have revenue, and that gets me back to the other question. If you want to do something about Social Security, the short-range thing is, of course, remove the cap, then maintain the social safety net in general during this emergency with the Wall Street sales tax. That will get you a lot of revenue, although the levels of speculation will fall rather rapidly once the sales tax is in place. But that will continue, and that will be an important source of revenue, right? 20 billion, 25 billion for New York State. Beyond that, you want to get the recovery. Well, the zombie banks are not going to give you the recovery. Whatever Paul Krugman thinks, you can't really organize the entire recovery and the entire economy on the basis of the federal budget alone. You've got to seize the Federal Reserve. Seize it, nationalize it, federalize it. Ben, Helicopter Man, you are going to put out those successive terror tranches, $1 trillion each, 0% century bonds from the states. They're going to rebuild all the infrastructure, and you know the drill, the ports, the railroads, the highways, the electricity grids, the public housing, the canals, the water systems, schools, hospitals. We need 1,000 modern hospitals and so forth. Plus, use that 0% credit to finance space colonization and production. The story of the Curiosity rover, we haven't been able to devote enough time to this, but that is one of the. I was asked the other day, has anything good ever happened lately? And yeah, the Curiosity rover on Mars. There's an example of what the world should be concerned with. That's exactly the way forward for humanity, is that kind of a project and those spin-offs, but that's got to be done then on a massive level, plus your biomedical program, plus your high-energy physics, and keep an open mind about what you can fund in that regard. So all of this to factor in. The student debt is in the news again. Another story on one of the network programs in the evening. So we got $1 trillion of high-interest student debt. The interest is not as high as it would have been under Ron Paul, but it's still too damn high, as we say. So what do we need? We need a student loan amnesty, and that would have to be at the minimum a 5-year freeze, a 5-year debt moratorium on interest and principal on all student debt. Life has to go on. You can't tell people to put their lives on hold, right? 5, 10, 15 years for what? To pay this debt? This is insane. Even Herbert Hoover probably could have seen that, right? The Hoover moratorium of June 1931 at least showed that he was aware that the most dangerous kinds of financial debt have got to be subordinated to the survival of something. So we need that applied today, and don't look for either Wall Street party to do it. And the rationale for this would be, dear zombie bankers, we bailed you out. Now you do something for us. Remember the foreclosure crisis. 7% of American homes are in the process of foreclosure. We need the Fraser-Lemke Act. Stop it. If you can get a payment plan approved by any court at any level, you stay in your home. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio for our second hour. We're reminding you of the key gathering. The presidential campaigns are not where it's at. The important one is the October 27th founding convention of the United Front Against Austerity, 56 Walker Street, Tribeca, Canal Street, Manhattan, New York, noon to 6. Keep checking the internet, and it eventually will pop up as a web page with all the other information. That will be an organizing conference. That will be practically oriented. The idea is to come out of there with a platform and some people willing to fight for it. And we need it because we're getting this word from Sam Stein here at the Huffington Post, Bernie Sanders and others, warning that Obama is getting set to sell you out. In the case of Romney, it's clear he's attacking with the reactionary proto-fascist Ryan from the world of the John Birch Society and the Koch brothers and people like this. But in the case of Obama, maybe it's not so clear, given the kind of rhetoric that we're hearing. But remember, the essence of Obama is deception, and that's what you read about in Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, and Barack H. Obama, The Unauthorized Biography. So remember, those works are absolutely relevant. And now coming up, just too weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon putsch against America with polygamy, theocracy, and subversion. Man, talk about subversives. This guy, Brigham Young, a hardened traitor, just proofreading some of that chapter, shocking quotes where he says, Abraham Lincoln is a cursed scoundrel. It's very interesting. Some of the stuff about the Mormon hatred for Abraham Lincoln got onto the Daily Paul, and sure enough, the Paul-tards, the pallbearers, loved it. They lapped it up. Right? The Lincoln haters, the people of the DiLorenzo School of Historical Falsification, the various lost cause, neo-Confederate types. This is a blind alley, and people who want to repeat that need their head examined. By the way, 150 years ago, we're getting the action at Yucca and Corinth in northern Mississippi, with Grant successfully dealing with Van Dorn and Price and the rest of these people, Confederates. So we just want a couple of other points, right, where programmatic intervention is important, right? If you want to help the Chicago teachers, they needed the Wall Street sales tax as the answer to how you're going to pay for all this. In the case of the student debt, it's clear there's got to be a debt freeze, and the people that have been bailed out are well situated to do that in reparation for all of the horrible things that they've done to this country. The question of the 7% of homeowners that are still under the gun of foreclosure. Well, Fraser-Lemke Act, stop it. Freeze foreclosures. If you can get your payment plan approved by any court, any judge, any level, you stay. The United States Postal Service, I was interested in the Missouri Senate race between this unbelievable troglodyte, Todd Akin. I couldn't believe this person actually exists in today's world, but they sure do. So anyway, one of the things in the debate between Akin and McCaskill, not brought up really by either of them, but in Missouri, all right? Let's take Missouri as a nice centrally located place. One of the questions was the rural economy. In other words, any business, any manufacturing, anywhere but a big city, really, depends on the U.S. Postal Service. Now, we're told the U.S. Postal Service is now going to default on a debt. This is a complete fake. It's a setup. This is the hand of Hastert the Bastard. Remember him. Hastert was the Speaker of the House, right? He was what was left over when Gingrich was swept out of there in the 1990s, and he did this as a poison pill. He said, I want to destroy an asset strip and privatize the U.S. Postal Service. So I'll force them to pay 10 times the usual amount of future retirement and health costs. And that's what is being defaulted on, in quotes, right? It's complete fraud. So all you have to do, if you want to stabilize the U.S. Postal Service, roll back Hastert the Bastard's poison pill, and you'll save the Postal Service. You care about rural America. You care about small business. That the U.S. Postal Service is the lifeblood of small business. It is the largest enterprise in the world. You know what I think about this. It is founded by Benjamin Franklin, and by God, we will keep it. It's hundreds of thousands of jobs. It's a tremendous capital investment. We will not privatize. We will not asset strip, come hell or high water. So there's another one. The blasé elitists on the Diane Rehm National Public Radio program this morning, right? She's on vacation, so they had somebody else. And they, what's the Congress going to do to try to solve the problem of the Postal Service, assuming there is one? The only problem is really what the Congress created. The Postal Service doesn't get money from the federal government. All they need to do is to be allowed to do their future planning like anybody else, and you've stabilized for quite a number of years. But the blasé cretin on this NPR show, it's not a priority for Congress to fix this. Oh, is that right? So we're going to have the lame duck session come back, and their priority is to cut your throat, but not to save the U.S. Postal Service. Again, if you don't like that kind of action, October 27th in New York City is the place to be. Fight back. We've got to have a capability to intervene in these struggles on the one hand and to mount candidacies on the other. Not either or, both. Right? Both. We've also had the debate this week about the redistribution, once again, something from Obama in 1998. Look, you want to talk about redistribution. This tax code, left over from Ronald Reagan, basically, the 1983, 84, 85 tax reforms with, remember, Reagan and Rostenkowski. And Rostenkowski was undoubtedly already being blackmailed that they would send him to jail to go along with some of this stuff, which he did silently. The current tax code, if there's a 15% capital gains rate, which includes carried interest for a parasite like Romney, that's a lower rate than most wage earners are going to pay. In particular, I think the top rate for wages is about 35%. So the difference between being a coupon clipper and somebody who works, who has to probably get up and go to an office every day, The current tax code redistributes income upwards. Can you dig it? And people say, oh, redistribution. Obama wants redistribution. Yeah, the current reality is redistribution from the working class, the poor, and the middle class into the pockets of the super rich finance oligarchy. So that's the redistribution that I don't like. Obama is trying to posture as somebody who protects you from China. They both are, right? Romney says he's protecting you from Chinese dumping and Chinese runaway shop, sweatshop economics, and Obama the same thing. Put your money where your mouth is. Protective tariff, 10 to 15% across the board tariff, just to stabilize domestic production. Because we are also not going to give up on industry here in the United States, right? Despite I think we have a British spokeswoman of the Reason Foundation saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter, give up manufacturing, obviously Britain has done it, and look how wonderful they're doing. Now, let's also talk now. We're shifting gears, got to talk about war and peace. Netanyahu's speech at the United Nations, I think, indicates a certain softening. He may also be realizing that MIT may not be a sure thing. He may not make it with MIT, so he's got to cover both possibilities. He's got to play on both tables. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. October 27th, New York City, the founding convention of the United Front Against Austerity, and keep your eyes peeled, Tarpley.net for Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon putsch against America, polygamy, theocracy, and subversion. So Netanyahu, it's somewhat milder, turning away from a direct confrontation with Obama. I think if he thought he could get Obama out, he'd go for it and put his little pal Mitt in there, because Mitt is malleable putty in the hands of Bibi. But no, rather he comes with this cartoon, right? The Wile E. Coyote bomb. Now, I say Wile E. Coyote. You find the bomb that he showed, the 19th century anarchist-style bomb with the big fuse, a big black sphere with a cylinder at one point and a fuse coming out of that. Take a look at the cover of Barack H. Obama, the unauthorized biography, and you'll see Bill Ayers with one of those, and it says Weathermen on it. But in this case, we're told that at the UN press room, right, they have a huge football field full of correspondents watching this on a TV hookup, that they yucked it up. They thought this was funny. And then the red line, to draw the red line across the top of the sphere. Well, there is no proof. And the only answer to this is no. The United States will not be dragged into war by this desperate reactionary demagogue. Obviously, the Israeli economy is so wretched that Netanyahu has to compensate with more and more of this insanity. And we've got to draw the line. And, of course, you can't look for either one of these two gutless wonders to do the job. Obama's speech, well, you can look at, I did an intervention on Press TV this week about that. It's essentially a campaign speech. Let's look further at the Middle East. Out of the UN General Assembly, the most dangerous things are Tunisia and Qatar calling for an Arab League attack on Syria. This is bad news now. Qatar, okay, the Thanis, these are the Al Jazeera people, are the biggest warmongers. So that's what you're getting with Al Jazeera. And you're getting that through Pacifica and NPR. The answer to that is also no. Morsi of Egypt says there has to be action to stop the fighting in Syria, but not military action. Well, good for you, Morsi. You pulled back before you went over the cliff, because you were getting close to it with your antics there at the non-aligned movement. Cameron, on the other hand, big warmonger Cameron, ready to fight to the last American, as always, shooting off his yap on Syria. We're told that there's heavy fighting near Aleppo. And of course, unlike what National Pentagon Radio thinks, there are two sides here, not three. It's the government against the jihadis. It's the government against Al-Qaeda. It's not like there's government against democracy activists and the jihadis are coming in. No, the jihadis, the Wahhabites, the Salafis, the crazies, that's what there's been. So it's been the government against them. Now, we're also told that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Quds Force is there with advisors. It's exactly what you'd think. If Qatar and Saudi Arabia can come in on one side, well, what do you think? Hezbollah fighters coming in on the side of the Syrian government. Boy, don't mess with Hezbollah. You can ask the Israelis who got their head handed to them in the Lebanese incursion of 2006. These are some of the most effective fighters. We're told that there are now 300 different jihadi groups in Syria, and that should become a government. That will become one of the scenes from Lawrence of Arabia, right? The council in Damascus at the end of Lawrence of Arabia. So there's Al-Qaeda, essentially. So we're also getting demands that the Al-Qaeda fighters in Syria should be given Stinger missiles, shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. Boy, that will certainly help the security of air travel worldwide. If you put that, and this is coming from the Republicans. This is coming from the Republicans who brought you what went on in Afghanistan. So all of this happening. The important thing is that the stability and the fighting trim of the Syrian forces looks increasingly good, and the presence of the Quds Force advisors and the Hezbollah advisors and indeed fighters, that is likely to pose serious problems for these 300 different groups of Al-Qaeda and their other variations. Now, the Republicans continue to harp, in particular Hannity and these other people are going crazy about the Benghazi events. What do they hope to get from this? I guess the idea is that Obama is running that he liquidated bin Laden, therefore there is no more Al-Qaeda, and the Republicans can say, it's not true, look at this, Al-Qaeda is killing the ambassador. Well, let's remind ourselves, the film is from the Romney campaign, and I'm amazed that nobody has made this connection. The film is the Romney campaign. This Akula, the Copt, the Egyptian Copt, is the fall guy. He's now in jail for parole violation. And the key person there is not Akula, it's Nasrallah, the higher-level Copt, who takes you directly to the September 11th, 2010 Islamophobia rally at Ground Zero. These are the people who are against the Ground Zero mosque, and they're also the same ones who are behind the incendiary stuff about savages that they've put in the San Francisco, New York, and Washington subway systems. It is the general matrix of this is, of course, the Islamophobia network personalities you may know, Pamela Geller, but principally John Bolton. The dominant personality of the Islamophobia network is John Bolton, likely future Secretary of State in the Romney campaign, and there's nothing to add to that. That's been clear for a couple of weeks. You read that on Tarpley.net within days. And Benghazi, same story. Who is the prime suspect for killing the U.S. ambassador? It's Kumu, the Guantanamo Bay alumnus. The way you get out of Gitmo is you make a deal with the CIA. You're working for them for life. When a CIA asset like Kumu kills the U.S. ambassador, that's where we want to look at it. And we're thinking CIA, Mormon, Mafia. So that's that in a nutshell. So let's look further. Now, we had obviously a lot of domestic U.S. stuff. We want to talk about some Senate races here. We'll try to do some quick vignettes of the U.S. Senate. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We got to remember there's also a congressional election coming up here. A couple of things about this. generally speaking, the minimum goal you want to have is divided government, unless you could get a collapse of the Republican Party across the board, and then a very quick split of the Democrats into two parts. Your basic line is divided government, but let's just take a look at some of these. It's unbelievable. The troglodyte, the caveman Todd Akin. Again, I watched the Missouri Senate debate. This is a benighted obscurantist from the dark ages. But neither one, not Akin and not McCaskill, have any real solution for the U.S. Postal Service. On the other hand, we know Rand Paul, I'm waiting for Rand Paul to endorse Akin. I don't know if he will, but his friend Demented, right, Dement of the Koch faction, is now for Akin, and Diabolorum, right, Rick Santorum is for it. So the Tea Party, Todd Akin is now the cover boy for the Tea Party. But speaking of cover boy, let's go to Massachusetts. Cover boy Scott Brown, the American gigolo for State Street Bank. Remember, I'm Scott Brown, and I drive a truck, and he drove a truck through any possibility of any financial regulation on the Dodd-Frank bill. One of the people who destroyed whatever potential there was there, not much, but the coup de grace came from Scott Brown, the cover boy. And we've just had another case of the Brooks Brothers riot. Remember that riot that we had, Don't Count the Votes in Florida, with a bunch of congressional aides, Republican reactionary hack operatives there demonstrating in the hallway, don't count the votes. Well, now we've got one where they come out and go with the war hoops and the tomahawk chops. So between Miss Prim and the gigolo, probably Miss Prim looks like a better alternative. Now we have to go to the Hoosiers, Indiana. Murdoch the Morlock. Richard Murdoch, written Mordock, I think. Murdoch the Morlock is now tied with his Democratic challenger. This is a prize reactionary specimen, right? This is the usual stuff. The social safety net, the entitlements are all unconstitutional. This is also a creepy person. Don't fall into the clutches of Murdoch the Morlock. Nebraska, the attempt of New School Kerry to come back, Bob Kerry, I think in this case, somehow not taking off. But the idea that North Dakota and Nebraska are still competitive for the Democrats indicates further weakness by Romney. Here in Virginia, George Allen versus Kane. Kane now slightly ahead. Generally, the picture looking not too good for the Republicans. On the other, if you want to keep divided government, probably the status quo. Certainly, in terms of the House, right? Nancy Pelosi says strive for 25. This is considered unrealistic, but I would say this Roscoe Bartlett here in the Maryland suburbs, not looking too good. Of course, this is the Hobson's choice again. Roscoe Bartlett against Delaney. Delaney being somebody who ran nursing homes full of abuses, practicer of usury, and so forth, and there we go. So this is a terrible, terrible choice. Linda McMahon, not a clown from the Hippodrome, but the mistress of the Hippodrome there in Connecticut. And of course, she's on the full reactionary caveman alley-oop line. No way to keep the social safety net. Get rid of all of that. So a lot of John Birch Society thinking. Now, speaking of John Birch Society and their sponsors, the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, right? Because the John Birch Society is essentially a spin-off, a project of the Skousen operation there in the 50s and 60s in the Mormon Church. We've now got on Raw Story, desperate Mormons will fast on Sunday, September 30th. For the Kolob candidate. They're worried that Mitt is not looking so good. The Brigham Young University newspaper, how you could have a university named after that guy in this country, I do not know. He's a worthy priesthood-holding leader, and they're for him. More news from Kolob. We have two blogs. One is the Mormon Think, and one is the Mormon Curtain. Now, the difference is Mormon Think, these are critical Mormons, but still in the LDS. And then the Mormon Curtain, more or less outside. One of the dominant personalities of Mormon Think is David Tweed, Twede, and he has written some relatively cautious critiques of Romney. He has now received a cease and desist order from his bishop, meaning his parish priest in Christianity. The Mormon Think, the columnist of Mormon Think, David Tweed, told to cease and desist, and on September 30th, there's going to be a hearing to excommunicate him for apostasy. And apparently apostasy means if you criticize Mitt the Twit in public, then you are guilty of apostasy. This is the problem. This was the main reason for the troubles the Mormons got into in the 19th century, is this monolithic block behavior, block voting, monolithic, and clawing after political power and a state within a state. And that's what it is, right? That's what you see out there. Now, we've also, so Tweed had written these columns, but we've also got the Mormon Curtain. The dominant person there is Steve Benson. Now, this is a more radical criticism. Benson, I have seen, this is a descendant of Ezra Taft Benson. Ezra Taft Benson was the prophet of the entire church in the 80s and 90s, and he was one of the Quorum of the 12 going back to World War II, really. Complete reactionary and, above all, racist. He said, Martin Luther King, communist, absolutely unacceptable, big supporter of the John Birch Society. And one of Ezra Taft Benson's sons actually went to work for the John Birch Society, from which later on we get Ryan. So you get the idea. So things are moving there. The Nevada Mormons, the Nevada LDS, demand that their members speak with one voice. This means monolithic block voting. And I think it was Harold Bloom of Yale who speculated if the Mormons became a bigger denomination, they would be a threat to democracy, because it's this insistence, this obsessive idea that they've got to have monolithic block voting, that opinions, ideological conformity is actively, aggressively enforced by these bishops and stake presidents. And if you want to see a bishop and a stake president, Bishop Romney is the guy. And I say bishop again, he's a bishop in formal Mormon terms, that would be a parish priest in Christianity. But he's also, as a stake president, that's a bishop. So he's a bishop in fact and in function as well as in name. So this is going on. And, of course, we're still following Glenn Beck and his attempts to try to defend polygamy, to try to minimize this stuff. All right, so we'll be back in 1 minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. A final plug for the October 27th founding convention of the United Front Against Austerity, 56 Walker Street, Tribeca, Canal Street, New York City, noon to 6. Organizing and action will be the mainstay of this event, we would hope. And just too weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon putsch against America, polygamy, theocracy, subversion. Keep your eyes on Tarpley.net. It's been imminent for a couple of weeks, but now more imminent than before, let's say. Couple of things left over, right? If you are concerned about the price of gasoline, we have the discussion about, is the price of gasoline going up simply because of the QE3, the flooding of the system with hot money liquidity? I would say marginally, but the main thing is speculation. The main thing is the use of derivatives on the London ICE exchange. The answer to the prices of food and energy is not simply the printing of dollars. It is speculation, 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 using derivatives. Anything that dodges that. It's not the market. It's not the government that's doing it. It's not the federal printing press that's causing these prices to go up. It's specific speculators intervening with derivatives to make this happen. An important difference, and one of the ways in which this ideological hangover from Ron Paulism, the Paul-tards, is still crippling people's mental faculties. Let's see. Other than this, I guess we better. Oh, we wanted to wrap up on the more about LaRouche. Oh, wait! Before we do that, another news item from Kolob. Just if you look up Kolob on the Wikipedia, very interesting. According to several LDS writers, such as Cleon Skousen in his book *The First 2,000 Years*, the Earth was created near Kolob over a period of 6,000 years, and then moved to its present position in our solar system. This hypothesis is based on oral comments attributed to Joseph Smith Jr. The hypothesis is also based on a passage from the Book of Abraham stating that in the Garden of Eden, time was measured after the Lord's time, which was the time of Kolob, for as yet the gods had not yet appointed to Adam his reckoning. Kolob. So the Kolob candidate in some difficulty. Now, concerning the LaRouche issue, which has attracted some interest, right? People want to be aware of that interesting document, Why We Left, by Sky Shields et al., others who had been in the so-called LaRouche youth movement and then dropped out. I was asked about events occurring in this entity in 2003, 2007, and of these I know nothing. I ceased attending most meetings in this in 1997, and by January 1998, this had come to a complete halt. So there it is. A couple of other examples, though. The thesis being that what is being purveyed is disinformation, which conforms, it's coherent with the general goals of the U.S. intelligence community. Let's give one interesting example. We went through this earlier in the year. Let's take the case of Sarkozy. Now, we know that Sarkozy is the great example of a CIA president of France, and the reason we know this is that Sarkozy grew up in the Frank Wisner family, that because of the remarriages of his mother and so forth, he ended up growing up in a household where the dominant person is Frank Wisner. This is a State Department CIA family. Of course, when I say CIA, I'm talking the U.S. intelligence community in general, but for purposes of shorthand and economy, CIA. The CIA, in that sense, was extraordinarily delighted to have Sarkozy as president of France, and you could see that they were willing to do all kinds of things to get him reelected. Remember, Mohamed Merah, the patsy, was somebody who was a long-term contact asset of the DGSE, the French intelligence services. He was selected, I think, to be the fall guy for a bunch of shootings in which he may or may not have had a role. He may simply be an Oswald who was the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you could see that there was an intelligence agency, and it's the one I'm saying, the U.S. one, that was trying to get Sarkozy reelected by letting him start his reelection campaign with this event, which seemed to validate Sarkozy's worldview. That didn't work well enough. But then the question came, to get on the ballot in France, you have to go through a process. Now, let me preface this by saying the person that the Anglo-Americans hate and fear in France is Dominique de Villepin, a left-wing Gaullist with some very interesting ideas and, above all, a past of personal integrity. He stood up to the thug Colin Powell in the United Nations, in the Security Council, in the spring of 2003, when Colin Powell came with his catalog of lies, which his assistant now says was the absolute low point of Colin Powell's entire career. Well, that's debatable, but certainly a very low point. Villepin stood up to him. Now, that should have attracted everybody's attention. Whatever else he is, whatever his ideological failings, a man of character, somebody with a backbone. All right. So the great fear of the CIA was that Villepin would knock out Sarkozy in the first round of the French elections, and that we would then go on to a second round, probably between Villepin and Hollande, with Hollande still being, by all odds, the likely winner, but something of a debate would have been much better for France and the world would have been Villepin against Hollande, because there you would have had a left Gaullist against a so-called socialist, a fake socialist, who is largely, maybe not quite as much as Sarkozy, but largely sold out to the Anglo-American banking interests, as Hollande also said. So the question was how to keep Villepin off the ballot. Well, in order to get on the ballot, you've got to go to the mayors of France, right? This is the Fifth Republic Constitution. You've got to go to the mayors of France and get 500 signatures. And if you know the terrain, you can, if you've done it a couple of times, you can profile which mayors might be available for which candidates. So Villepin obviously was negligent in the sense that he didn't send his people out soon enough to do this, to get those signatures so that he would get on the ballot. And instead, out of nowhere comes Jacques Cheminade, the friend, what does he say? He's inspired by LaRouche. Comes on, and his people are out there early and often, and somehow they manage to get 500 plus. They go significantly over the necessary 500 of these mayors, and they concentrate precisely in that left Gaullist area, because that's what Cheminade is calling himself. He's calling himself a left Gaullist. So they get 500 plus mayors. Cheminade is then on the ballot. The trick is each mayor can only sign once. So once you've signed, that's it. And what we, I believe, found is that when the Cheminade people had departed, the Villepin people arrived, and they were told, sorry, we already signed. We can't sign for you. We'd be delighted, but he's gone. Villepin more or less said this. And the result of that was that Villepin was not on the ballot, and the U.S. intelligence had done whatever it could to prevent the Villepin against Hollande. What they got was the Sarkozy against Hollande, which was much less interesting. So that is another example of the kind of thing that we have to be on the lookout for. And we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio, and in the meantime on Tarpley.net and Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. Remember, October 27th, New York City, and Just Too Weird on Tarpley.net. See you next week. Clear, it should be clear to everybody, Obama is getting ready to sell you out. And he told you at his speech at the Democratic National Convention, he described himself as eager to reach a grand bargain with the reactionary Republicans. Even if the Republicans are defeated, he's willing to use them as a fig leaf to do this. Now, here's the specific indication we have. Let's use a useful article by Sam Stein in the Huffington Post. Sam Stein of the Huffington Post on the Internet writes on the 24th of September, Obama may do Social Security reform during lame duck session, Senate Democrats worry. Washington, concern is mounting among some Senate Democrats that President Barack Obama will make a deal with Senate Republicans during the lame duck session, that means December, of this year that would result in changes to the benefit structure of Social Security. One of the most progressive voices in the caucus, Bernie Sanders, says he was glad to hear Obama tell the AARP last week that he would be open to raising the cap on income that is taxed for purposes of paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. This is, of course, the cap at about $103,000 per person. The Social Security payroll tax cuts off at that point, and everything you earn beyond about $100K, you don't pay into the Social Security Trust Fund. So, of course, that's good, but that's the coding, that's the posturing, that's the deception, and we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Get set to attend the... Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. We're taping on Friday, the 28th of September, and we are looking forward. We're organizing for the gathering, the founding convention of the United Front Against Austerity that will be held in New York City in Tribeca by Canal Street on Saturday, October 27th from noon to 6 at 56 Walker Street, and that will be the founding convention. And there are important developments on the organizing front. I'm going to basically relegate most of those to next week. We'll get a full report on who's coming, but some fairly well-known names are already committed, so that's important. And above all, names that represent political forces, right? Not just individual stars, but people that represent some kind of mass mobilization capability. So October 27th, and this the reason for this will be the theme now of the first couple of segments. The other thing is the book. It's still coming, but it's now the title. We've got a title, Just Too Weird. Just Too Weird. Bishop Romney's Mormon Putsch Against America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Just Too Weird. Bishop Romney's Mormon Putsch Against America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. And we'll be talking about that in the second part of the program. But now let's go to human destiny behind him. He doesn't seem to be able to make progress. This has got something to do structurally with the Republican Party, right? They've got a crazed, reactionary, petty bourgeoisie. They've got an unbalanced line way to the right. If you follow the crazed, reactionary, petty bourgeoisie, also known as the Tea Party, you're halfway to Stormtroop Junction. You can't go and try to sell that directly to the American people. So he's trying to straddle from the center, which of course is center-right these days, all the way out to the crazed Tea Party, lunatic, petty bourgeoisie, and it can't be done. So he's oscillating between those 2 points. This doesn't work. So the ruling class is now, they're not abandoning Romney because his fundraising continues at an intensive rate. And certainly we should bear in mind that the final blitz of brainwashing ads by Romney will have significant effect. And we've just had, for example, the little Elmer Gantry, Ralph Reed. Remember him from the Madoff days? And the, I'm sorry, not Madoff, but the other guy, right? The Abramoff. I got the wrong off. The Abramoff period of Republican history. But now Ralph Reed is back, and he's got $15 million to spend, and that'll buy some ads. So there are many countervailing processes going on. But the principal point is the ruling class is now preparing, really playing on two tables, right? One is if Romney wins, still possible, absolutely possible. And we'll talk about the polls. So first of all, to the question of the day. Austerity does not work. Austerity is genocide. Austerity is national suicide. Austerity is the class war of the rich against everybody else. It's the class war, not just of the Koch brothers, but also of Soros, and very much to the point, Peter Peterson of the Peterson Institute, the Concord Coalition, somebody who has smeared about $500 million around Washington in recent years to push his austerity agenda, right? This is a Lehman Brothers boss, right? The biggest bankructeur of the age, and they have the gall to say that the crisis was caused by entitlements, by government spending, and he's been trying to do this, remember, with the Strauss and Howe generation books. He obviously gave them money, and he said, do whatever, write whatever you want, but get something in there about how Social Security must go. Well, dear Peter Peterson, when the crisis came, it didn't come as a budget crisis. It came as a world derivatives panic caused by collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps, and other derivatives used by the zombie banks and the hedge fund hyenas that you represent. So these people are now gathering their forces. The momentary situation would seem to be this. The ruling elite seems to have, at least there's a growing view, that Romney is hopeless, that Romney, his bungling, his incompetence, momentarily seem to be incorrigible. Even with the ruling class, even with the Anglo-American ruling class, the masters, in a couple of minutes, but the other possibility, of course, that Obama could win. So what do they do then? And I think we ought to address this now as a coming crisis, and indeed this is exactly why we need the United Front Against Austerity. This is absolutely crucial. Obama is running a campaign in which he poses as the guardian and defender of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the social safety net, the entitlements, the reforms of the New Deal, the Great Society, and the New Frontier. That's his public posture. At the same time, remember, I warned you, deception, dissembling, lying, trickery are the essence of Obama. And if you haven't figured that out, buy the books. Barack H. Obama, The Unauthorized Biography. Obama, The Postmodern Coup. Both 4 years old, but the psychology has not changed. This is also incorrigible. This does not change. So Obama is posturing as the protector of the American people from these Republican ogres, and ogres, of course, they are, but Obama's going to protect us. He is, at the same time, preparing to betray his own base. He's getting ready to sell out all the poor people that are now working to get him reelected. And I've warned you about this. I've been telling you about this for months. The key words are the fiscal cliff, the lame duck session, and the grand bargain. I warned the group at the World's Fair in Flushing Meadow, New York, back in July. I've been talking about this repeatedly